have a guest up in Montreal, Canada. His name is Jason Mainella. Jason is the founder of Tiny Drones, and of course we've been hearing lots about drones of late, and so we want to talk to him about not only his business, which is selling tiny drones, and we'll see what one of those looks like in just a minute, but also want to talk to him about just sort of the whole trend of the industry, you know, where he sees it going and what he sees his role in that being. So Jason, welcome to EV World.
Hi, how are you?
Now, most people think that, well, you know, EV World, that we just talk about electric cars and stuff like that, but in fact, there is a growing industry, if you will, in electric flying machines, for want of a generic term. And we've got, we've got everything from the giant Solar Impulse, which is that solar-powered airplane that flew from the Middle East and got as far as Hawaii, and then, of course, ran into some battery issues. What else? To the E-Fan, to a whole series of manned aircraft, and now we've got this where if you can't actually sit in it and fly it, guess what? You can take a little remote control and you can fly one, and that's kind of what you're into with tiny drones. So to begin with, let's talk about what is the difference between a drone and a quadrocopter for people that might not be familiar.
Okay, well, a lot of people, you know, drone is a very vague term as far as the industry goes. So a lot of people, you know, I'm sure you've also heard the term UAVs in general as well. Right. So the unmanned aerial vehicles as well. So there's not really a big difference between drones and actual quadcopters. You know, drones are usually used as a term for UAVs, mean like unmanned aerial vehicles, mean that they can be flown without an actual pilot inside of it, correct? Right? So that's a general consensus of what a drone really is. A quadcopter itself is, you know, has 4 blades all the time, right? So it always has 4. So like a helicopter has 1, a quad has 4. Right. A drone itself can go much larger, though. I mean, there's octocopters out there. I mean, I've even seen manned ones now with 16 props on it, right? Yeah. So 2 people can sit inside, and I've seen those cats now.
Yeah, the crazy guys over in Switzerland.
Yeah, I saw a couple of test flights with it, and you know, when I saw that popping off, I'm like, oh, that's going to be like future of transportation, right? Going from one skyscraper to the next. Instead of taking buses on the street, you're going to take a quadcopter, 20 people on it, or a drone with 20 people on it, and go from one skyscraper in the city to the next. And I'm like, that was my idea when I started seeing those manned. Right. So I think the biggest difference really is there a pilot, is there not a pilot? And then obviously when we're talking quadcopter specifically, it means, in example to our teeny drone, are 4 blades on it.
Right, okay. My God, that's small. Now, I remember when the first one came out, it was, oh boy, this has been probably about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, the first company that introduced those, and I thought, oh, I got to have me one of those. I got to have me one of those. But then wisdom prevailed, and of course, at that point, I think they were looking at about $300 to $500 for one of those, and if you added the GoPro camera and stuff like that, it was, you know, considerably even more. Yeah. That technology has come a long way now, as we can see there. I mean, this thing is no bigger than the palm of your hand. So I guess how do they work? I mean, sort of explain a quadcopter, sort of in layman's terms.
Well, actually, like what I like to explain to everyone is like the biggest difference between, I guess, you know, especially when a lot of people are in the RC world using RC helicopters. And I mean, it's not just, you know, hobby enthusiasts, right? I mean, the people who actually develop drones, let's say the DJI company, one of the larger drone companies, they started in doing aerial rescue aircrafts, right? So they'd carry around those big old VHS black and white cameras on them, and they would send those helicopters into the mountains to look for lost people, right? So, I mean, the biggest difference with the quads is, I mean, anyone who's ever flown a remote control helicopter has known, you know, it's a constant, when you have your control, you're constantly moving, nonstop, trim, it's going side to side, you hit a bit of wind, it's flying everywhere, it's turning. Right. A little bit harder to fly. Where these drones, because there's actually 4 propellers, all the air and all the points actually point into one. Meaning there's a gyro system built inside, which gives it a balancing.
Right.
And all the propellers are pointing to one point, which means even if you take this drone and you throw it and hit the throttle, it'll balance itself out and hover.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's no way to really throw it off balance. So even when you're in the wind, the drone will actually fly. Like, people always ask us, like, how do you fly outside with these? And I'm like, well, they're only 13 grams. So, I mean, the wind doesn't push them. And because of the advanced gyro system, the calibration is so advanced that each propeller could kind of move on its own. So I kind of explain it like traction control in cars as well. Yeah. So, you know, like slipping on ice, and then all of a sudden one tire is catching, the next tire is catching. So in a sense, a drone kind of does the same thing. The onboard software compensates the speed of each motor to make sure that the gyro is always at on a flat surface. So
how did they get that? I mean, I knew Paul McCready, and actually Paul McCready from AeroVironment was, you know, people involved with electric vehicles for any period of time will know who Paul McCready was. But Paul, in fact, I actually talked to him once, and he was actually showing me one of these little tiny UAVs that he had built, and this was this was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, we've come now to the point where we got these microelectronics now that, I mean, you've got what, gyroscopic stabilizers and things in this little thing about that big.
Exactly.
So apparently, then they've now become a lot easier to fly than what maybe Paul might have had back 15 years ago.
I think, you know, as most technology, as, you know, it advances, it gets smaller, it gets, you know, more, it gets easier to use. So, like, as an example, like this teeny drone, I mean, you could hand the remote over to anyone, and probably within 20 minutes, you know, they're going to be flying it quite stable, and they'll be in the air moving around. And a lot of the other models are like that too. I mean, DJI, I mean, their drones go all the way up to, like, I think $20,000, but even their start-off drones at $800 with, you know, a nice GoPro on it. I mean, you could pick up the remote and fly quite easily with it, especially when you have like the return button, like GPS button, that it comes back to you when it gets lost.
Right.
And the battery's about to die, it comes back to you. So I think really what happened is, you know, as the technology advanced in gyro technology in general, so we all see it in our cell phones today. A lot of games are actually, you can move your phone.
Right,
like
right.
Control like this, you do all types of swipe motions, computers are becoming like that, tablets are becoming like that. So I think when the technology really advanced in all these systems, it allowed people in the quadcopter or drone industry to attach to those technologies and use them to create a more stable product, right?
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, you know, gyros, the first gyro I was really impressed with was really the Wii. The gaming console was the Wii, right? So you had the remote with the gyro, with the scan. So I think that's really where we saw it coming down to a smaller size. And then, like I said, when they started integrating into smartphones. So I think really once they got past that leap of how to create a gyro that is using hardware and software combined, old gyros were literally like, it was literally like a liquid, right? So it was a type of liquid connected to a software base that would measure and it would keep you kind of balanced. Where the newer ones are all software based, so they could actually, you know, figure out longitude, latitude, speeds of motors, and there's multiple things that occur within the software to balance everything properly.
Right.
So I think really once the I think back then the hardware side was there. Once the software side was able to be attached to the hardware and really make it something that could learn on its own in a sense, meaning, you know, like an example, this tiny drone, it knows when it's on a flat surface, you turn it on, you calibrate it, the gyro knows this is where it needs to be.
Right.
So after it's been calibrated once, then you could take it, like I was telling you, you could whip it and it'll calibrate on its own. You know?
Yeah.
So once it knows where it needs to be, it's perfect. And even some of the more advanced, they recalibrate in the air on their own. So
yeah. Well, there's a great demonstration of this that is on, I think it's a TED Talk or something like that, where I forget his name, but he's got these things in there, bouncing balls and
they're playing
doing flips, and he
has a glass of water on the top, and he's moving all around the room, and it doesn't spill at the top.
Yep.
So, I mean, what's really interesting when it comes to that, right, is the steadiness of a drone. So, like, you know, a lot of people are looking at these right now. I know the news is getting a lot of, like, negative press about drones in general because, you know, they're becoming a problem. People don't understand the education of them, the dangers of them, etc. But then there's the whole other side of the field, where medical is actually starting to get into using drones due to the stability of how, compared to, let's say, a human hand. Right. We can't balance something like that and turn in circles, where a drone could actually fly stable and hold something without moving at all. So medical is actually starting to get into using them for surgeries, for all kinds of procedures. So I think that the drone industry is definitely something that's coming in the future. Where I kind of stand on that point, though, is really starting off small and learning about the drones, right? Like anything in life, you're not going to go, you should never go out and, buy the fastest Ferrari first, right? You should learn how to drive first on the car, eventually get a faster car, and then move your way up. Same thing happens with drones, people today, they go out, they spend, $2,000–3,000 on a drone. They know nothing about it. They open up the box, they fly it, they hit a tree, they hit somebody, they hit a car, whatever it may be. They lose control of it, and they don't realize how dangerous it is, right? Some of these things are quite big, they're quite heavy, and they could do some pretty hefty damage. I'm not saying these little ones are, but the bigger ones can do that.
Right.
So, I think the biggest important part of the drone industry right now is really pushing on the educational factor of the drones. I think, as usual, our governments are going to be a little bit slower on getting regulations out. They got to pass bills, they got to go to vote, they got to do all this type of stuff. But in the meantime, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that's not being regulated. I don't know if you heard about in California with the forest fires. The drones were flying. People were stuck in traffic. Some people decided to throw some drones out and go investigate the forest fire. And because of that, the water planes couldn't
get in, exactly, yep.
So I was talking to the Malibu Times about that the other day, and, I was explaining to them, that's why it's so important that people really start on the drone education, getting into schools, getting into a curriculum, learning about the robotics, the balancing systems, how to repair, how to fly. As teeny drones, we love drones in general. I'm a drone enthusiast. But my main focus is actually getting into the educational sectors and using these little drones as trainer drones. So something that can't hurt anybody. And it can really give someone the idea of how the 6-axis gyro works, how swoops work, how fast they go. This little thing goes 80 feet in the air in about 2 seconds.
Wow.
So, they are, so you can just imagine a larger one, which goes kilometers into the air.
Well, I remember seeing one video of and I forget it was one of the early models, that this guy flew this thing up above the clouds. He just kept, I don't know where he was, 10–15,000 feet, and it sat there, and of course the battery ran out, but by that point it was out of range. And then you see it start to tumble.
Tumble down from the sky.
Yeah, exactly. I think they found the drone one place in a pair of woods, and then the camera somewhere else. But it was interesting video. But that of course obviously raises the problem, because you've got these things proliferating. You got people. We've had this problem, for example, with people taking laser lights and shining them into the cockpits of landing airplanes. That is really dumb, Yeah. And you got people now that are using these things and putting cameras on them. And you got some people, I think I saw a headline recently where the guy took a shotgun and shot one out of the air, right?
Neighbor took his neighbors out of the air.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we've got this really interesting technology that I'm fascinated with, obviously because I'm a pilot, and I like things that fly, and so I'm curious about it. But at the same time, you've got these people doing dumb things with them, and the governments, of course, like you say, here in the United States, people are flying these things, and you're seeing a lot of use for them in television production and film production, but they're still somewhat restricted. I don't know what are your limitations up in Canada on these?
So right now, it's kind of limited depending on where you are in Canada, but the overall consensus on the regulations on drone is anywhere where you're using a drone for commercial use, meaning you're actually using a drone to earn money, right. You actually require a license to be flying in that area every single time. So you need to go get a permit with the city every time you decide to fly in an area like that. And also the way it kind of works at the moment is anything that's under 4 pounds is technically considered a toy drone, so they're not considered dangerous, and you're allowed to fly those in parks and wherever it may be. But anything much larger than that, it's considered, like I said, it's considered a commercial drone and requires a license. Okay. But like I said, there's no really regulations. So like, I mean, I drive around the city. I mean, I'm the first to notice a drone in the air, right? Because I'm always looking into the sky and seeing what else is going on over there.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, people are just flying them anyways because you know what? They don't know about the regulations. They don't know about the laws.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure the people in California that are flying their drones over the forest fire were sitting in traffic. They had a drone in their trunk, and they're just like, "Hey, what's going on with all this traffic?"
Right. Let's fly it. And of course,
they were stopping the forest fires, from being put out. I don't think they were thinking that they were making. I don't think anyone in the right mind would be like, "Oh, I'm going to go put a drone over that forest fire and cause issues."
Right. Exactly.
So I think really it's the regulations here in Canada they're getting there as well, but we're pretty much sitting in the same board as the rest of the world. Where there's not much going on as far as actual regulations. There's bills in place. There's people talking about it, but there's nothing set in stone other than you need a permit if you're going commercial use.
Right. Well, let's talk about your business a little bit here. When did you start Tiny Drones?
So I started. I started in the drone business about 2 years ago. I didn't know I was actually going to create the teeny drone. I was, I fly back and forth to China a lot for business, and one fair 2 years ago, I literally saw these things just hovering over my head, and I was like, "What are these things? They're awesome!" And they were so small. I was using bigger ones.
Yeah.
So about 2 years ago, I started really testing with them, working with some manufacturers, testing parts, pieces, qualities, all that type. And so about 2 years ago, and then really in January of this year was our launch date, right after Christmas. We wanted to make for Christmas, but we just didn't feel the quality was there, so we didn't push for Christmas season. We're like, let's just wait till afterwards.
Right.
We launched about January, and we've been pushing hard since then. And so it's been about, it's 7 or 8 months that we've been rolling full-time with teeny drones now.
Okay, so let me see what you got there. Let's kind of show it up so we can talk a little bit about the technology itself. There's the box.
It comes in a nice little box.